What role can singing play when a nation is faced with annihilation by its neighbors? Can culture hold a people together? For centuries, the small country of Estonia has faced these questions. With the Baltic Sea to the west and Russia to the east, Estonia is a gateway between Europe and Russia and has always been a desired place. People here have faced wave after wave of occupiers. Danes, Swedes, Germans, Poles, Russian Tsars, the Soviet Union. All have seen the value of this land. But Estonia's darkest and bloodiest chapter began in 1939 when the Soviets crossed the border. Within months, thousands were executed. Others disappeared. In one night, 10,000 men, women, and children were taken from their homes, loaded into cattle cars, and shipped to slave labor camps in Siberia. More than half never returned. Then the Nazis came. They withdrew, and the Soviets returned with a vengeance, this time staying for 50 years and nearly eradicating the Estonian nation. After 5,000 years on this land, Estonians almost ceased to exist. But Estonians fought and sang and survived. For centuries, people here from all over the country have come together, joined voices and sung. In Estonia, fairy tale heroes are not brave noblemen who slay dragons and save damsels. Their hero is the shrewd old barn keeper who sits by the fire, waits, watches, and acts only when the time is right. Patience is a weapon. Caution, a virtue. This is the story of how culture saved a nation.
7, then I took part first time in the song festival, singing in the boy choir. And I just remember the first feeling when I'm just one singer with all others, 20,000 singers. You are part of the one nation or part of this country, and just a great feel.
Before he's talking, he's singing. He was too little. One song I remember is when he gets sleep. Viire takka tulevad kolm meresõidumasinat.
It was our lullaby, yeah. I still remember that.
Yeah.
The most important thing to understand Estonian history is our singing tradition.
Singing is a part of growing up here. And so too is a sense of the country's history. After centuries of occupation, Estonia gained its independence in 1920. For 2 decades, this new country flourished. It was a nation of high literacy rates, a strong economy, and an optimism for the future. But by 1939, the major European powers were becoming restless, and there was little room on the international stage for this small country of 1 million people. All the singing in the world couldn't prevent the events to come.
Up until 1939, Estonia was an independent country, and then in 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed a pact which divided a lot of Europe between them and actually was the basis for starting World War II.
Hitler and Stalin's plan would devastate Europe. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was a military agreement between the Nazis and Soviets, containing a secret clause that divided the continent between Germany and the Soviet Union. Estonia was to be taken by the Soviets. Within days of the signing, Hitler invaded Poland. Then over 25,000 Soviet soldiers poured into Estonia. And within a year, there were more than 80,000. 1 Soviet soldier for every 12 Estonians.
In 1940, there came the total occupation of Estonia, and we had no possibilities to organize our defense because we were alone.
The first months of 1940 meant taking people out of their houses and then arresting several thousands, executing them.
The idea of this was to destroy all resistance of the society. Teachers, scientists, writers, politicians, everybody who has been a member of Estonian government or the Prime Minister was killed.
Estonians lived in fear of arrest, execution, or a sentence to Soviet concentration camps, the Gulag. No one was safe. The greatest fear was a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Local Soviet officials would grab any convenient person to fulfill prisoner quotas. 1/3 of those deported to Siberia were children.
Mina kui laps, 14-aastane laps, olin lihtsalt number, sest arvud olid antud. Ei nutnud, sest see oli nii lollakas, saad aru. Sest minutil, kui sa pead kooli hakkama minema ja päeval on klaverieksam ja sa osutud olema kuskil kiskina kuskil puuris, siis peaks ütlema, et väga naljakas. Aga muidugi oli inimene, kes kohutavalt karjus ja see oli üks naine, kelle väga väiksed 4 last jäid teadmata kuhu. Nii et ta krabati kuskilt kinni ja tema metsik karjumine, mis ei lakkanudki kogu selle tee jooksul, see tegelikult oli päris kohutav.
My grandfather was sent to Siberia. Why? That maybe he had a bit more land than others.
There were various methods of torture, physical torture, psychological torture too. The hunger, the cold, these were unsuitable for the surviving.
This was very hard time for our parents.
Nation.
Yeah, all the nation. Because we don't understand why they were taken and sent to Siberia. For what?
Nobody listened to us. And I suppose that is this feeling, being left behind the curtain where nobody can hear what is going on here. And what was going on really was the most direct, severe genocide, really.
Ma pean sulle ütlema, et mina olen vabana sündinud. Ja sellepärast tean ma täpselt, kuidas see vabariik välja nägi. Millised olid inimesed, milline linn välja nägi, kuidas üle terve Pirita hõljus see vanilje ja vahvli jäätise lõhn. Dirigeerimist hakkasime õppima siis, kui ma tulin Siberist tagasi.
The first year of the Soviet occupation became known as the Year of Suffering. But the Estonian nation still survived. In 1941, Hitler betrayed Stalin and broke their agreement. The German army invaded Russia and also stormed across the border into Estonia. It was now the Nazis' turn to devastate the country. Nazi ideology replaced Soviet propaganda. Young Estonians were either forced into the German army or shot. But within 3 years, the war turned against Hitler. Germany retreated, and Soviet troops once again invaded Estonia.
So what are you supposed to do within the 4-year time span when you have both your enemies there, opposing each other and opposing you? Aha! Who were those Estonians who cooperated with the Russians? We had to get rid of you. And then 3 years of German occupation and the Russians come back. Ha! Who were those who cooperated with the Germans?
With grisly memories of the Year of Suffering, 70,000 Estonians, fearing death, fled the country. But it wasn't an easy escape. Some drowned in small fishing boats. Some were killed by Soviet planes. Others were captured. But thousands eventually made it to the West, where they would preserve the Estonian language and culture, hoping that someday they could return home.
All our family was torn apart. Part of the family was deported to Siberia. Part of the family escaped to the west. Some stayed here, and some were killed.
But the rest of the world knew little of Estonia's suffering. In 1945, Stalin convinced the Americans and the English that he would soon set up free elections in Estonia. Roosevelt and Churchill agreed to this deception, and Stalin walked away with Estonia in his firm grip. World War II officially ended soon after. But for Estonians, this was just the beginning of a new, long chapter of Soviet occupation. The country was devastated, having lost over 1/4 of its population.
There were tens of thousands of people who nevertheless decided to fight because they were sure that you couldn't give this country away without fighting. Only a nation who fights for its freedom can have it, even if this fight is lost.
"30,000 young men and women took to the woods to fight for a free Estonia, ambushing Soviet soldiers and sabotaging military convoys. They called themselves the Forest Brothers."
Ja nii siis läksin mina ka varakevadel 1945. Läksin ära metsa, võtsin kirve ja oma suure revolvri, mis oli selleks puhuks juba varutud. Ja läksin lihtsalt metsa ja hakkasin metsas elama. Tegin omale punkri elamise jaoks. Siis kohtasin me teisi metsavendi. Elasime koos nendega.
Alfred Karman lived in the forest for 8 years, 1 month, and 7 days.
Keegi meid ei kuulnud, keegi meist välja teha ei teinud. Meid tapeti ja terve Eesti rahvas oli kommunistliku vägivalla all. Raudne eesriie oli karmilt kinni. Põgeneda ei saanud. Ja nii läks elu edasi. Meil ei olnud seda lootust. Meil ei olnud mitte mingisugust lootust peale selle edasi elada nii kaua, kui on võimalik. Meie viimased mehed, kes metsa jäime, meie arusaamine oli niimoodi, et nii kaua kui relv käes, elu sees ja Eestimaa pind jalge all, allaandmist ei ole.
Like many Forest Brothers, Karman placed his hopes in the promise that the West would eventually pressure the Soviets to leave Estonia. This never happened. In 1952, he was captured, interrogated, tortured, and then sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. With the occupation fully entrenched, the Soviets next began an intense period of Russification. Tens of thousands of Russian workers were relocated to Estonia, sometimes forming entirely new cities.
Russification was one of the main tools for keeping the Soviet Union together.
Farms were taken from their owners and collectivized, Those who resisted were arrested and sentenced to Siberia. Anything that could bring back memories of pre-Soviet life was destroyed. Estonia no longer existed. It was now a Soviet Socialist Republic. But there was one thing holding Estonians together, giving them hope. Singing. For thousands of years, music has been a vital part of life here. In fact, this tiny country has one of the largest collections of folk songs in the world. And since the 19th century, Estonians have traveled from all over the country to join voices in massive song festivals. These festivals were as much about national identity as music.
Every corner of the country where they had a small singing group had the right to participate. They practiced the songs all winter, and then they came together, all in national folk costumes. 25,000 singers on the stage at the same time.
But with the Soviets in power, things changed.
Laulev rahvas, neil on millest laulda, kelle auks laulda. Laulda rahva uuest sünnist, laulda võidust, laulda suurest Stalinist.
In 1947, after years of war, the song festival continued. But now, the Soviet propaganda machine realized that this huge gathering provided the perfect opportunity to show how delighted Estonians were to be living under communism. But the festival also presented an opportunity to Estonians. Conductor Gustav Ernesaks composed a new piece of music to premiere at the festival. The lyrics were taken from a well-known national poem written 100 years earlier by Lydia Koidula. Its title was Mu Isamaa on the Minu Aram, or Land of My Fathers, Land That I Love. Surprisingly, the song slipped by the Soviet censors, and suddenly 25,000 voices were singing a love song to their former country. The song was sung in Estonian, not Russian, and in a matter of moments, it became the unofficial national anthem.
And it's a beautiful song. The words are so nice. And definitely it was a sign of protest, where all this pain and love and belief in the future of this nation. And I guess this very moment was important for all Estonians.
Nii et laulupidu ei ole meil mitte ainult muusikaline sündmus, kus me kuuleme meie paremaid laule, vaid see oli ja see on ka praegu edasi. Kõigepealt võimalus läbi elada seda, et me oleme eestlased, meil on oma kultuur, me oleme üks rahvus. Meid on nii vähe, et me peame seda rõhutama, et me oleme olemas.
Throughout the 1950s and 60s, life under the Soviets consisted of communist youth groups, May Day parades, and thousands more deportations to Siberia. People couldn't express anything that might be construed as political opinion, fearing the omnipresent shadow of KGB surveillance.
It was all behind the scenes, constant psychological pressure. It was amazing, a monster, and you never know how big it was, where it was, who in your family or your friends, who were the agents. So there was never official face of the organization. It was always behind the scenes in the minds of the people. And they were very effective in making you scared.
Even the simplest traditions, like celebrating Christmas at home, were forbidden.
My father took the Christmas tree home every Christmas, but the curtains was closed. Because if someone saw that you have Christmas tree in your house, it was very bad.
I am not absolutely aware that most of Estonians thought that we can be free. We just try to find the way how to make this life better, more honest, more open, more happy.
So much depended on the family situation because parents couldn't speak easily. At school they taught a lot of crap, but I did get some hints from my parents. My father mostly told how things really were.
I still have inside me that things that we talked between ourselves had to be kept in our house and never to be spoken, even to our closest friends at school. I couldn't talk about these things outside.
Because Soviets were afraid, of course, of the big enemy there outside, wanted to come in and wanted to destroy all this beautiful socialist happiness that we are living. That was a main issue.
Throughout the years of occupation, the song festivals continued, with 2 days of Estonians begrudgingly singing songs about communism and Lenin and Marx. But at the end of the festival, they sang the traditional Estonian songs as well.
And everybody actually came to this laulupidu to sing these 3 or 4 additional songs. But this was emotionally so strong feeling that it was worth to sing these scrap songs and then the real emotional songs in the end.
1969 was the 100th anniversary of the song festivals, and Estonians were anticipating a large celebration. But the Soviet authorities were looking to squelch the Estonian spirit. So they discouraged the wearing of traditional Estonian folk costumes and forbade the singing of Mu Isamaa on Minu Arm, the unofficial national anthem that premiered at the 1947 Song Festival.
Ja niimoodi oligi, ma mäletan, seegi laulupidu, see oli jah, see kuulus juubeli laulupidu 69. aastal, kus jällegi koorid on laulnud oma ametliku programmi ära, lavalt ära ei lähe. Pannakse seal tavaliselt, nagu oli need puhkpilliorkestrid mängima, et summutada koori laulu, sellest midagi ei aita. Rahvas, ma mäletan, karjub seal lauluväljakul, mu isamaa on minu arm, mu isamaa on minu arm, niimoodi skandeeritakse kogu aeg.
I remember this time all singers want to sing Mu isamaa on minu arm. And we started to sing without leader. And then not once time, 2 times, 3 times, all need more. It was very, very good feeling.
No, it's interesting thing, if 20,000 people start to sing one song, even without the conductor, then you just cannot shut them up. It's impossible.
The Soviets were forced to let the song's composer, Gustav Ernesaks, take the stage and conduct the song.
Ja lõpuks see asi kujuneski selleks, et laulupidu, mida 5 aastat hoolega ette valmistati, tema peamine eesmärk oligi selles, et tulla kokku ja koos rahvaga maha laulda see üks keelatud ja kõige tähtsam laul. Ja kõik rahvas võis minna koju oma igapäevase töö juurde teadmisega, et Eesti vaim elab edasi.
In the 1970s, the song festivals did keep the Estonian spirit alive. But the oppressive reality of daily life still consisted of long food lines, incessant propaganda, and little hope for anything resembling freedom. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power. Educated by the Stalinist school system, he was a firm believer in communism.
Soviet television took pains to show Gorbachev, a man from a new generation, with Prime Minister Tikhonov and Foreign Minister Gromyko, men from the Stalin days, men born before the Bolshevik Revolution.
That was probably done to show the Soviet people and the world that there is continuity inside the Kremlin.
While he intended to maintain the communist grip on the Soviet Union, Gorbachev could no longer deny the crumbling economic devastation of the past 70 years. So he planned to modernize the Soviet system, introducing the concepts of glasnost and perestroika.
And perestroika means relative freedom within the Soviet system. And glasnost means, this is a Russian word for free speech.
And let's say Gorbachev and his cohorts had been traveling in the West. They must have seen something with their own eyes. Why don't we have this prosperity back home? We have tried and tried and tried, and we are poor, we don't have anything. People are unhappy, and so on.
And Gorbachev was relatively intelligent, and he decided to launch a major campaign of renewing the Soviet system, but within the system so that the communists should remain. But he made one very basic fundamental mistake. He didn't realize that whenever you give free speech to people, then things get out of hand. The ghost gets out of the bottle.
But the Estonians here, that had their own goals, they thought, our big chance. If we are going to change something, okay, let's do it. Let's do it the real way. Let's do it our way. And of course, that wasn't exactly what Gorbachev had in mind.
In 1987, Estonians took their first step in testing this new openness. The Soviets had unveiled a plan to begin strip mining in Estonia. Some decided to push the limits of glasnost and organized protests against the mines.
At first, I think that this environmental issue was more safe because even in Soviet Union, you could speak about the environment, about nature.
They calculated that by taking non-violent action and speaking only about the environment, Gorbachev wouldn't use force to stop the protests. In light of glasnost and perestroika, this would have been an international embarrassment for him. The strategy worked, and the mines were halted. Soon after, a small group of activists decided to try something riskier, to openly speak about politics and history and the Soviet occupation.
Poliitiline on aeg teha niisuguseid otsustavaid liigutusi, et midagi uut peab tooma sisse. Ja siis me mõtlesimegi välja selle, et terve Eesti saatuse raskuspunkt on ju Molotov-Ribbentropi paktis juriidiliselt. Ja et tegelikult on aeg selle eest kõvahäälselt hakata võitlema.
Lagle Parek, along with Tiit Madison and Heikki Ahonen, decided to openly contest the legality of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. All three had previously spent hard prison time for anti-Soviet activities. They planned a demonstration but couldn't publicize it, so they depended on word of mouth and the illegal Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. On the morning of August 23rd, with KGB agents watching every move and taking photographs, the group arrived, thinking that only a handful of people would be brave enough to show up. Surprisingly, several thousand people appeared.
The authorities say that if you disturb traffic, then you can expect a very harsh punishment because it could have led to 10 years of labor camps and things like that.
The police shut off the public address system, so demonstrators used rolled-up paper megaphones to be heard over the crowd.
First of all, they started to talk, and then they were understood that they are not yet arrested. And then they talked more, and they understood that they're not arrested again, and then they talked even more.
The demonstration at Hirve Park was the first time in 50 years that anybody had spoken publicly against the Soviet occupation and gotten away with it.
No, siin on just, ütleme, see Hirve pargi monument, Hirve pargi näide on väga hea näide, kuidas kasvab julgus, millega siis üheskoos edasi mindi. See on kohutavalt tähtis, et keegi alguses käib välja.
And more Estonians began to stand in defiance. At the end of 1987, the Heritage Society was formed. Using discussions about Estonian culture as a cover, its members planned to push free speech to the next level, exposing the truth about Estonia's brutal Soviet history.
If Gorbachev says that there is free speech, if there is glasnost, if there is freedom, then let's talk about history as it was. Let's tell the truth. So the basic message was let's tell the truth.
Within 4 months, the Heritage Society had grown to 10,000 people. In April of 1988, they decided to organize a demonstration celebrating Estonian history and culture. It was held in the university town of Tartu. The demonstration was monitored by Soviet police.
The feeling was that KGB would like to provoke some clash, to show that here is something going on which could be called violence, which will need then some armed intervention or something like that.
Since the beginning of the Soviet occupation, it had been illegal to fly the Estonian blue, black, and white flag. But several of the organizers had an idea.
They decided to have all three national colors, black, blue, and white, as separate flags, side by side, so that in practice you had the full national flag.
There are some memories in the life which will never go away because they changed you. I remember this feeling that there's so much people. And then you see the old ladies crying. They just stood, looked on us, and they cried. It was something which you always remember.
The demonstration at Tartu was a success. But the main people to speak out were a relatively small group of activists and students. Over the next few months, word spread, and more Estonians began gaining courage. Two months later, a summer celebration concert in the capital city of Tallinn erupted into a spontaneous declaration of hope.
There was so many people. The square was full of people, and all people was very, very happy.
Siin vanalinna päevade lõpul laulsid Ivo Linna neid Mattiiseni Isamaa laule. Partei ja võimud kartsid seda vanalinna päevade lõppu, kuna oli teada, et kogu need päevad kihutasid ainult rahvast üles. Ivo Linna ütles, et siin meil ei lubatud rohkem esineda, läheme nüüd kõik lauluväljakule, laulame seal edasi. Siis juba laulukaare ette hakkas rahvast kogunema, nii et lõpuks võis meid olla ka 100 000 seal.
So we went there with the friends, and it was great to see that all the strangers, they were just singing like one man. And we were hand in hand, and it was great. I still have chicken skin, if I remember that.
And then we saw something absolutely fabulous, absolutely
incredible.
Yes, we saw our national flag.
And suddenly there was a guy with a motorcycle who had our Estonian flag, and it was a really great feeling to see.
But then when this first step was done, then suddenly, in a moment, the flags started to blossom everywhere. It was like spring is coming, and then things are starting to blossom.
A few Estonian flags had come out in previous demonstrations, but never had they been so brazenly flown before so many people in one place. Word spread, and for almost a week, thousands more people arrived each night. And now, average citizens brought flags they had been hiding in their homes for nearly 50 years.
It may sound today a bit silly, it may sound even naive. Those days, it was so natural to express our feelings by singing and declaring that we have right for our own country.
ja vaata sellest ma sattusin niivõrd vaimustusse, et hommikul kodus ärgates ja esimese kohvi ära joonuna ma istusin kohe laua taha ja kirjutasin selle laulev revolutsiooni, andsin edasi seda meeleolu. Kui siiamaani on revolutsioone tehtud hävitamisega, põletamisega, tapmisega, vihkamisega, siis meie hakkasime oma revolutsiooni tegema naerdes ja lauldes.
In the heart, there was a little bit afraid feeling that this was not a free country here. This was Soviet Union.
After those nights, there was no turning back. The revolution had a name and widespread support from common Estonians. No matter what happened next, it was clear that singing would be the fuel for change. But a broad range of movements began to emerge, all with conflicting strategies about how best to achieve freedom. Some were cautious, others quite bold. The Heritage Society, led by Trevimi Veliste and Mart Laar, used the cover of Glasnost and Perestroika to generate open discussions about Estonian culture and history. They knew that talking about Estonia's past would undermine Soviet authority.
And it matched perfectly with Gorbachev's idea of glasnost, free speech, so that you could freely speak about what had happened, you could freely speak about history, and everybody understood immediately that there must be something more in it than just speaking about the past. And it gave people a lot of hope.
The Estonian National Independence Party, led by Lagla Parek, was quite bold. Its leaders publicly declared that under international law, the Republic of Estonia was still an independent nation. They wanted the Soviets out of Estonia. Few Estonians openly supported the Independence Party, still living in fear of Soviet reprisals. The Popular Front appealed to the masses by offering a safer strategy, working with the Communist Party to push for greater freedoms from within. But they had no intention of declaring independence. The Popular Front offered people some level of hope, but without forcing them to challenge Soviet authority. Edgar Savisaar announced its formation on a TV show in April of 1988.
Ma pean silmas poliitilist massiorganisatsiooni partei juures. See oleks organisatsioon, kes partei kõrval kõige laiemates massides teostaks perestroikat Eesti.
There were tensions amongst the leaders of these different movements. But in the end, most Estonians chose to stand up for freedom, showing up at any demonstration regardless of who organized it. Gorbachev was surprised by the groundswell for independence, so he attempted to quiet the unrest by replacing the old hardline Estonian Communist Party leader with a moderate named Vaino Valjas. Valjas acted as a buffer between the Estonians and Moscow. And when confronted by independence-minded protesters, he had a tendency to look the other way. Meanwhile, the Russians who had been relocated to live in Estonia began to get nervous. Since 1940, the Russian population in Estonia had grown from 8% to over 40% of the nation, mainly due to the Soviet policy of Russification. With help from Moscow, some people started their own anti-independence movement called Interfront.
Протаскивать идеи сепаратизма, вплоть до двухпартийности и прямого противопоставления.
In the wake of Glasnost, Estonians were finally able to speak out. But the Heritage Society, the Independence Party, and the Popular Front all had very different strategies for gaining freedom. And now, Interfront was working against any change whatsoever. It began to appear that Estonians lacked a unified voice, and that the energy of the first protests would be lost, that the movement would fizzle out into a series of disagreements, even over how best to define independence. In September of 1988, the Popular Front organized a mass rally at the Song Festival grounds. No one anticipated the turnout. More than 300,000 people showed up. Nearly 1 in every 3 Estonians was here.
Me tahtsime teha ühe suure rahvapeo, samal ajal ka kõnekoosoleku, samal ajal ka poliitilise meeleavalduse ja arvasime, et parim koht rahva kokkukutsumiseks on Tallinna Lauluväljak, kõigile lisaks ka sümboolne koht.
The Popular Front wouldn't let Independence Party leaders take the stage, feeling that their views were too radical, that they might push the KGB too far. But they did invite Heritage Society leaders, assuming that their speeches would carry a softer message about Estonian culture.
I wrote my speech just a few hours before I spoke, and it was a very spontaneous speech, and I didn't read much of it. I read some passages, but I mostly spoke by heart. And then I also spoke the Estonian language should be the language of this country. And I also spoke about Russia's role in history, and I compared Russia to the bear of Europe, who just turns his eyes to the west looking for honey in Western Europe. Savisaar was very cross and very disappointed because of the way I spoke, because I was too radical, I went too far, and this is why everybody remembers that speech.
I was sitting there and looking at the people, and it was like an ocean. And then with every speech, that ocean started to wave more and more because the emotions were coming higher and higher. And I felt that that is a moment of great risk. And if there will be any match, then the fire could go and there could be something which you cannot then keep under any safety.
Tuleb süstida tulevikuusku, võiduusku ja tuleb vahepeal puudutada ka midagi nii kibedat, et see lausa pisarad inimestele silma toob. Nii et ma timmisin seda kõnet väga hoolega. Ja vaat siis ma konstrueerisingi selle sama lause, ükskord me võidame nii kui nii.
Ükskord me võidame nii kui nii.
Kui ma seejärel käisin igal pool Eestis edasi kõnesid pidamas ja vahel jätsin selle ütlemata, siis rahvas hakkas karjuma, Heinz, ütle see lausega.
Ta oli mitte ainult rahva meeleolu, tahteväljend, vaid ta näitas ka väga selgelt Moskva keskvõimule, et vastu hakata otseselt jõumeetoditega on vägagi riskantne.
important is that Estonian nation is very small, and we have no more weapons than singing. This being together, singing together, this was our power.
A sense of hope and unity was everywhere. With Vaino Valjas now heading up the Communist Party in Estonia, lawmakers felt that they could risk making changes. First, they brazenly passed legislation declaring that Estonian laws would take precedence over those of the USSR. A delegation of Estonian communist leaders were immediately called to Moscow to face an angry Gorbachev.
Ta tuletas mulle meelde, et tolleaegses liidu konstitutsioonis oli sisse viidud parandus, kus karistati 10-aastase vabaduskaotusega, kui tahtlikult inimene rikub põhiseadust või konstitutsiooni. Ta rõhutas lausa seda, et see on tahtlik rikkumine ja arvestagu ma sellega.
Working within the existing communist structure, the Estonian Supreme Council kept pushing forward, almost taunting Gorbachev. It made Estonian the official language of the nation rather than Russian, and replaced the Soviet hammer and sickle flag with the Estonian blue, black, and white.
The news agency TASS said Soviet leaders have ordered the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to drop a series of what are called radical new laws about economic and political freedom. The Kremlin says those laws violate the Soviet Constitution.
Estonian Communist Party leaders found themselves having to strike a delicate balance with Gorbachev. On one hand, cautiously working to increase Estonia's relative freedoms within the Soviet Union. On the other, avoiding any direct confrontation that could lead to a military crackdown.
Когда 26 ноября это все, заверяю вас, от самых добрых намерений все было. Так что, чтобы передвинуть все же жизнь, хотя методы неправильно, может быть, местами.
Ответственные, но будьте, показывайте пример, как вы глубины, ответственности и уважения закона. А все остальное я готов, знаете, выслушать, как и товарищи, и обсуждать. Но при одном, я убежден в рамках социализма искать ответы. И социализм позволяет. Самые необъединенные.
Moscow kept on denying that the Soviet occupation of Estonia was illegal. So on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, more than 1 million Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians created a 600-kilometer human chain.
It was something unimaginable. It was never seen before. We felt that this was something big.
Et igal rahval, ka väikesel, on vääramatu õigus olemasolule. On õigus rahvuslikule enesemääramisele.
It was an extraordinary show of mass defiance in the Baltic region of the Soviet Union, a human chain of protests that reached across the 3 Baltic republics, from Estonia in the north to Lithuania in the south.
it was very important feeling inside, and I remember that it made me shaky actually. It was such a great feeling to be there. That me, Ellen Liigus, I was important, I was part of the chain.
In the Soviet Union today, the Communist Party issued a stern warning to nationalist groups in the Baltic states, accusing them of whipping up hysteria in the region.
4 months later, Gorbachev was finally forced to admit that there were secret clauses within the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that led to the original Soviet invasion of Estonia. But this acknowledgement didn't change the fact that 50 years later, Estonia still remained occupied. So a group of Estonian activists developed a new tactic.
The idea was that Estonia had been illegally occupied in 1940, and Soviet passports had been imposed upon Estonians. This didn't mean that Estonians had been legally converted into Soviet citizens. It was simply political violence.
Therefore, Estonian citizenship still exists. So, since Estonian citizenship still exists, why don't we register all of the people who are Estonian citizens?
A campaign was begun to register people as citizens of the Republic of Estonia, rather than the USSR. In essence, denying the legitimacy of the Soviet occupation.
It started quite slowly because in the beginning we gave everybody a small ticket, that registration number and so on, that I am registered citizen of the Estonian Republic. They were called the tickets to the Siberia, and it was possible that they can be the tickets for Siberia, especially for those first 5,000 registered.
It was easy to start. The rest was a huge unknown.
But within months, 860,000 people, nearly every adult, had registered as Estonian citizens. This was an overwhelming referendum publicly expressing the desire for a truly independent nation. In February of 1990, the newly registered citizens voted for an alternative governing body called the Congress of Estonia. In March, the Congress of Estonia met for the first time. Moscow wasn't happy, but Gorbachev's new policies made it nearly impossible to prevent the Congress from meeting.
Eesti Vabariigi kodanike peakomitee nimel ma tervitan teid viimase poole sajandi Eesti elu tähtsündmuse. Tänasega algas meie vaba tuleviku esimene päev.
For 50 years, most Western nations had not recognized the legality of the Soviet occupation under international law. Therefore, many representatives felt that the Congress of Estonia was in fact the legitimate governing body of the country. But in reality, the Congress of Estonia had no army, no police, no money, and no organized government.
There was a tempting idea that the Congress of Estonia rightfully could proclaim it supreme authority in the country. In other words, take the power. Then it could have provided a pretext for Gorbachev and Moscow to intervene and crush the movement.
So after much debate, the Congress of Estonia decided it would not declare any official authority. At least, not yet. But now, the hundreds of thousands of Russians living in Estonia saw the writing on the wall. They stood to lose the privileges that they had enjoyed for decades if Estonia moved towards independence. Interfront played into these fears and began organizing increasingly hostile protests.
I remember they had really big gatherings at public places, which were really scary to see that there are so many people in numbers who are against the independence. There was a feeling that they are a really strong threat.
Вы почему пришли на митинг?
Поддержать единство всего народа.
Защитить от кого?
От кого?
Правительство правильно разговаривало с русскими и правильно решали вопросы все. Эстонцы очень хитрые люди. Они с вами говорят очень хорошо, си-си-си-си, а поза глаза нож держат в грудь. Вот какие эстонцы.
In May of 1990, the Estonian Supreme Council made it illegal to fly the Soviet hammer and sickle flag. An angry Gorbachev publicly reprimanded Estonia for violating Soviet laws. The very next day, Interfront protesters marched on Toompea, the capital of Estonia. They shouted a list of demands, including the restoration of the Soviet flag and the resignation of the Supreme Council.
Me olime suhteliselt muretud, sest senised intrid igasu mindi laiali, lehvitati punalippe ja karjuti maha eestlasi ja kõik ja sellega asi lõppes.
But this demonstration was different. The hostility was escalating, and for all intents and purposes, it was starting to look like an attempted coup.
Потом там могло произойти столкновение, это элементарно могло произойти, потому что, во-первых, к людям толком никто не вышел, их требования никто не захотел слушать. Но потом нашлись горячие головы, которые стали эти ворота трясти там и прочее.
They were shouting, they were climbing into windows, they were dragging down the Estonian flag and so on.
Eventually, the crowd broke through the gates and found themselves in the courtyard, ready to storm the building and take officials hostage. Word of the attack spread quickly, and Prime Minister Edgar Savisaar got on the radio to inform the public.
Ülemnõukogu ja Eesti Vabariigi valitsus kutsuvad rahvast valitsushoone kaitsele Toompeale. Interrinde ja töökollektiivi töönõukogu jõugud on Toompea lossi sisse piiranud ja seda rünnatakse. Kordan, Toompead rünnatakse.
Within minutes, thousands of Estonians flocked to defend Toompea. Interfront was now trapped within the courtyard, with no way out except through the Estonian crowd outside.
But it was really a tense situation because everybody thought that now the first violence starts. If it goes violent, there might be a big problem.
It seemed that violence was inevitable. But the Estonians remained level-headed. Eventually, the crowd parted, allowing a column of Interfront members to run the gauntlet and retreat.
And in this situation, that the Estonian crowd kept very calm, very cool. For me, it's the real value, the real symbol of this Estonian type of making politics, making it calmly and without blood, but making it so that you will have your objectives, your aims to be fulfilled. It was a major really victory we had, that we didn't have any drop of blood. Any drop.
Suur aitäh teile! Me olime kindlad teis, et kui te tulete meile appi, te teete seda tõesti just nii, nagu te tegite, mõistusega, lauluga, südamega ja just nii me olemegi kõige tugevamad. Aitäh teile! Aitäh!
things weren't going as peacefully in the other Baltic countries. Lithuanians were engaged in their own battle for independence. In January of '91, Soviet soldiers killed 14 people who were part of a demonstration at the TV tower. Hundreds more were wounded.
It seems that the Soviet leadership thought that death of our victims will just be a good lesson. What they forgot was the role of the free media. The people who were slaughtered were recreated as symbols.
Less than a week later, 6 more people were killed in Riga, Latvia. Many thought Estonia was next. In preparation for an expected Soviet attack, Estonians put up barricades around the capital.
It was something we expected from the Soviets. It was a normal way of behavior to protect their power, to protect the occupation, to protect their ideologies. And we were prepared that they will repeat it in all Baltic countries.
The Soviet system was collapsing, and Gorbachev's policies were not working. Communist hardliners in Moscow felt that he had not gone far enough in suppressing the Baltic independence movements, and people in the Baltics were as anti-communist as ever. In fact, they were emboldened.
Gorbachev was desperately short of time. He was always late. Always the ideas came a little too late.
In a final attempt to hold the Soviet Union together, Gorbachev agreed to a massive restructuring in which the USSR would become a group of semi-independent republics sharing a common presidency and military. Communist hardliners were appalled. One day before the agreement was to be signed, they arrested Gorbachev, staged a coup, and seized the government in Moscow.
In the morning of 19th of August, when I listened to the radio news, it was like a nightmare dream. So the old things have returned.
Soviet military reinforcements immediately rushed across the Estonian border to put down any independence-minded resistance.
When the tanks were in the streets, we didn't sleep at all in the night. And then we were afraid.
Absolutely. This was very bad days. This was not first time in Estonian history. Our grandfathers was in Siberia and was killed, and we afraid about our children's future. This was hard time.
One thing I told to everybody, move your families out. If you are the leader of any political movement, first who will be hit are your families. To catch you, they will take your family.
At Tallinn's airport, crack paratroopers landed and then moved into positions on the outskirts of town. Witnesses say fear is everywhere as Estonians wait for the military to strike. This is awful. I worry about my children, this woman says. What is to become of us?
2 young Estonian policemen were called upon to defend the country's primary broadcast tower in order to keep the Soviet military from taking over the television and radio broadcasts. If they failed in their mission, Estonia's only source of information would be silenced and replaced with hardline communist propaganda.
Tol hetkel tulla torni, teades, et tankid tulevad. Enesetunne püsis hea vaid tänu sellele, et tead, et su kõrval on kindel kaaslane. Aga selgus, et see on ka kõik, et otseselt mingeid juhtnööre ei olegi.
Many of these tanks tonight are reportedly moving toward the television station. Estonians, expecting some kind of assault, have ringed the TV station with trucks. in a last-ditched attempt to protect this precious source of information.
Arvasime ka, et huvitav, et kui rünnak peaks tulema, et mis kellaaeg valitakse. On üle maailma teada, et klassikaline rünnaku kellaaeg on tõesti kell 4-6 vahel.
The young policeman spent the night stationed at the tower, waiting. Meanwhile, members of the Estonian Supreme Council realized that this might be their last chance to act. They called for a special session at the capital.
Be there tanks, shootings, or be there the happy end, it was clear that we have to act anyway, because we have to restore legitimate state of Estonia. Is something which is the will of people, and there have to be resolutions, there have to be legal solutions for that.
The coup presented a window of opportunity to reaffirm Estonia's independence to the world. A few members of the Supreme Council invited leaders of the Congress of Estonia to the capital. This was a controversial move, but it was also a critical step to ensure that any resolution reflected the wishes of all Estonians. For hours, the Supreme Council and the Congress of Estonia debated details of the resolution. With Soviet troops closing in, they held a vote.
Lugupeetud Ülemnõukogu, kes on selle poolt, et võtta vastu Eesti Vabariigi Ülemnõukogu otsus Eesti riiklikust iseseisvusest, palun hääletada.
The resolution passed unanimously. After years of disagreement about how best to achieve freedom, the competing Estonian movements came together in order to give the world one common voice of Estonia's desire to reclaim its independence.
And suddenly we saw over the TV these events in our Parliament House. It was 11 o'clock and 3 minutes at night. I remember exactly this time because the camera was showing this clock. I remember to the end of my life these feelings.
This feeling was fantastic.
Yes.
Meie nähes võetakse vastu see kurikuulus otsus, mis meid muidugi paneb rõõmustama ja ahhetama üheskoos, sest et nüüd olles juba nii-öelda vabariigi võitlejad.
The vote for independence was a symbolic triumph, but it didn't stop the coup in Moscow. The conflict was far from over. At dawn, Soviet tanks arrived at the TV tower.
Väga lihtsalt tavaliselt kahele poole avanevad väravad tabalukukesega oli siis suure sõjaväe silveautoga lihtsalt ees sõidetud. Auto seisis täpselt uste ees.
Many Estonians headed to the streets to form human shields outside the TV and radio stations.
So I called to my mother and I said, come now to babysit my children. I have to go there and protect the radio and TV station.
The natural thought was that I have to be there. It's your place where you are living. The people hated Soviet regime. If this regime was attacking you, they just went to resist it. You are doing what you have to do.
Kõige rohkem me nägime muidugi pidevalt, mis andis ka lootust jõudu, oli meie omad inimesed.
You haven't had any guns, any arms to fight with the tanks, and it's stupid actually to fight with your fists. But somehow it felt so that you have to stay here.
Everybody knew this is hopeless, but they were ready to give their resistance. And those were brave people.
By mid-morning, Soviet troops had stormed the tower and were preparing to break down the door on the 22nd floor. But the two police officers devised a plan.
käisime välja ka oma trumpässa, kuna ta ikkagi ähvardas, et kui te ei tule, siis igal juhul torn võetakse. Meie trumpiks kujunes tuletõrje kustutus reoongaas, mis tähendas seda, et vajutades ühele nupule praktiliselt paari sekundi jooksul täitub torn gaasiga, mis surub välja hapniku ja mitte üks elav hing siit ei pääse.
Their plan would have killed anyone in the immediate area, including the 2 policemen, but it would also have then left the tower undefended. Their trump card was really a bluff. However, given the uncertainty of events in Moscow, a confused Soviet army waited a crucial 12 hours debating what to do next.
Tol hetkel me ei saanud aru, mis siis toimub. Tol hetkel me ei teadnud.
Gunfire in the streets of Moscow tonight, and tanks roll as Boris Yeltsin continues to lead the resistance.
Boris Yeltsin, the freely elected president of the Russian Republic, denounced the coup leaders.
We must demand their immediate resignation and bring them to justice.
Mikhail Gorbachev, the head of the Soviet Union, remained powerless under house arrest. Boris Yeltsin stepped in to face down the coup leaders. Yeltsin was head of Russia, the largest of the 15 Soviet countries, and his power base was strong. He publicly declared that Russia was seceding from the Soviet Union, just as Estonia had done the night before. The coup collapsed, and the Soviet troops in Estonia were ordered to leave the TV tower.
Ja kuna oli tõesti tol hetkel nende jaoks kindel, et kõik on okei, sõitsime alla, astusime välja, kui posi hääl hüüab rahva seast. Need ongi ju need 2 menti, kes seal üleval olid. Ja nüüd läbides selle torni pääsla hakkas kõik see rahvas plaksutama. See oli ilus. See oli tõesti ilus.
Within days, the Soviet Union completely dissolved. One by one, each of its 15 countries announced their independence. Around the world, countries formally acknowledged Estonia as an independent nation.
I believed all the time. I believed all the time that Estonia will get free.
I always felt inside that Estonia is free and has been free. It's just a temporary occupation here. Somewhere deep inside you felt that it is not true, that there is something else. And it was our destiny. It was always there.
For me, it feels like it's normal now. We just do our song festival and we sing our songs what we like, and it's one part of our culture. And we are free, we can do what we want.
Because this singing tradition goes from heart to heart, from family to family, from mother to daughter, and this is like you can't describe. This is they want to sing and say sing, and we are very happy for it.
Ciao. Ciao.
If it rains, so what?
This new life in Estonia now, it is free in our heart, in our mind. All these possibilities are now real, but was not real when we were young people.
Everything has changed now.
Absolutely.
It's a very unbelievable example how a totalitarian rule could be changed, not by violence, but through creating a democratic alternative.
I think that to have freedom through singing, it was the most important thing maybe in my life.
It's very important that the Estonians were able to save the language. They were able to save the culture. They were able to save the national thought about themselves. They were able to save something which can be called Estonianness.